Welcome everyone to another On the Record, Off the Record product advisory collective conversation. We are excited today to have JGP with us. He will tell you more about his background, but he is author of Implementing Data Mesh, and he's also with Actian. And the way that our on the record, off the record sessions work is the first half hour we record, the second half hour we do not record. The more contentious comments can be saved for the last half. And as you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat. JGP, would you like to start?
Yeah. Let's go. Let's do it. Okay. My name is Jean-Georges Perrin. Yeah, I was born in France. I now live not too far from Philadelphia. I've been writing a few books. The one in the middle are books for children, which I donate to the proceeds to an organization here. It's Black Girl Code and Girl Who Code to help women go a little bit easier in our industry. And the little weird logo under the green book here is a logo of the Beetle project at the Linux Foundation. And that's a little bit why I'm here today, talking to you about the data contracts and data products. And of course, in the context of AI, because these days, anything you do with data, it's related to AI. And that's the idea, okay? AI needs data. And the way we were doing data before is with pipelines, okay? We still do pipelines. You've got a producer of data, moves the data to a consumer of data, sometimes with a transformation in the middle, sometimes with quality assurance, and sometimes with documentation, okay? And often what I say is I've been lucky in my career that I've seen documentation quite often, but it's up to date for 3 days, and then after it gets obsolete very quickly. That's one of our issues in our industry. And right now what we're doing is, okay, the consumer being AI now, we're trying to bring this data to AI, and we're going to see that it's not as easy as it seems. And before we deep dive into all these things, I wanted to talk to you about a little personal story. So I've got 4 kids. One of them is graduated a couple of years ago and of a master's in AI from UNC. And he called me after he got his job at a major bank and said, hey, Dad, I'm in charge of this pipelines there. It should bring data to my consumers who are feeding something to a regulatory agency. And data pipeline was working, but unfortunately now it doesn't work anymore. And so he was freaking out. 3 months in the job, and okay, am I going to get fired? But after investigation, he looked a little bit into all of that, and he found out that the upstream database was a change of schema or something. So it was not his fault, but I told him, if you had data contracts here and there, okay, you would have known before your consumers that something was going wrong, okay? So therefore, that's why I've got a data contract you cannot refuse. Okay, so what is a data contract? And I'm starting with data contracts. So a data contract is really a link between a data producer and one or many data consumers. It also creates a link between the business representation of the data, the logical aspect of the data, and its implementation, the physical implementation, okay? And it also describes the metadata. For me, it's the data quality rules, the behavior of the data, your SLAs, your service level expectations, etc., that you associate with the data. When you agree with this thing, the data contract becomes the source of truth for your metadata, okay? I like to let that sink a little bit because it's an important concept. The data contract is a source of truth for your metadata. Once you accept this, and resistance is completely futile, you will understand that the expectation I have is in my data contract, okay? And I'm not doing that because we are trying to solve real problems. I would say one of my favorite is keeping documentation relevant, because you don't do documentation anymore. You put the documentation or the content of the documentation in the contract. We are going to talk about data products, okay? Well, there's a whole idea of what is data product thinking. So data contract is an enabler for that part. You want to be able to manage schema drift, because when a schema change in the database, like my son, is it the fault of the contract? Is it the fault of the product? Is it the fault of the administrators that did something wrong? We don't know, okay? But if it's in the contract, we know something wrong and something changed without a warning. And that's how it became a little bit as a reality when I was working at PayPal. we were implementing data mesh at PayPal in data products, and we realized that we actually needed this structure that became the data contract. And over time, the thing we did at PayPal was to open source the templates that we invented around data contract. And when I left PayPal, I took it and went to the Linux Foundation and co-founded the Beetle project there, which is now the open data contract standard, which is used by many organizations nowadays. Officially, my company Actian did a survey not long ago, and we realized that 41% of companies doing data contracts are actually using ODCS. And it's not like there's a competitors that are doing 59%, right? It's more like everybody had a homegrown thing. Sometimes it's even Excel, or I've seen a Word document which people were printing and signing as a data contract. So there's a lot of things there. But ODCS, as you can see here on this diagram, has 12 different blocks of metadata you can store. And the important thing is that there's only two that are required, the fundamentals and the schema. The rest, it's better if you have it, but it's not required. And that's where we start to think a little bit more in a product way versus a project way, okay? When in data, a lot of time we're thinking about projects. So I'm taking my data, I'm moving it somewhere. It's an entire project. I've got to follow the specification, etc. But the thing is, once it's deployed, we usually forget about it, okay? And we don't want to spend the maintenance about that. So here, in this situation, if you want to add data quality, we have provision to explain how you can add data quality in your contract. If you want to describe the infrastructure it's running, we have a provision to explain the infrastructure, okay? So that's really the whole idea. Not forcing you into doing all these things, but if you want to do it because you want to gain maturity in your contract, then you can follow the recommended ways. And as you can see, there's a bunch of contributors to your contract, data engineers, data scientists, etc., and including automation tools. And you've got a bunch of people consuming it at the bottom right there, where you see application monitoring. You can create smarter applications that can leverage this metadata. You've got tools, so you've got a lot of things there. And you've got also this bi-directional discussions you can have between the enterprise level tools like enterprise data governance, enterprise data catalog, etc. At PayPal, enterprise data governance were our best friends because they really understood that by deporting this to the field, they had less work to do, okay? It was part of the job. So let's look a little bit into what a data contract is. You can see if you're familiar with it. This is a YAML file, which in this situation describe a table. And you see there's a lot of room for description, okay? So description here, and that's really the idea, okay? You've got all these placeholders where you can add all the descriptions, all the data, all the information you want there. Here's another example. If you remember, I told you you could actually create this link from the logical world to the physical world. And this is how you do it, okay? You've got a logical type and you've got a physical type. If you're a data engineer, the varchar of 2 is a really important information. If you're a business analyst, the string is good enough. But if you want to have very low level comparison of schema, the physical type is required. If you just do a report, the string is plenty enough. Okay, so that's the kind of things you get from the contract. The authoritative definition here, for example, says also that even if the contract is a source of truth, it doesn't mean that it has all the truth. It can have more information that, for example, here a business definition could be found in the catalog, or a reference implementation could be found in GitHub. Okay, so that's the kind of thing where you extend the authoritative definitions to other parts of your enterprise. Another really interesting aspect is the way you can track teams, okay, and who worked on your data contract. And once more, it's not forcing you to do it, but if you want to do it, this is a recommended way. And in this situation, we've got this guy, C. Eastwood, who was a data product owner, DPO, and he was actually replaced by this guy, Jay Wayne, and you see why he was replaced, because it was playing it a little dirty. Okay, anyway, so that's the kind of thing you do. But what an important thing is, do I get value? Okay, so let's say, for example, I have a data warehouse with a schema, and it's guaranteed by a contract. And like my son, if something happened, the schema changed, for example, then I can decide, is it a breaking change or is it a minor change or is it a change that I can automatically recover from it? In this situation, I can say, well, it's actually a change I can automatically recover from it. So I just modify my data contract accordingly. And then after I modify my data contract, I just push it in GitHub because data contracts, that's where they live. It's code. They live in GitHub. And then when I'm pushing it there, after the validation via CI/CD, and it just automatically updated to my catalog or to my observability tools or any ODCS compliant tool. Okay, so you see the power of what you can do with data contracts. Let's talk a little bit about products, okay? Data products are products undeserved of that. So before going into the details there, I just wanted to share a result from a study we did with Bark. So I don't know if you're familiar with Bark. Bark is a European version of Gartner. They're out of Germany. They specialized in data contracts and data products. It's a great company. Okay. We worked with them. So Acton worked with Bark in a study, which we are actually releasing just this month. So this slide is anticipating that. But one of the results is that people using data products have actually more AI project in production. And it's not like 10%. Okay? It's 3.5 more AI project in production for people using data products. We were completely blown out when Bark came with the result. We just didn't know. It's an impressive figure there. But what is it? What is a data product? Okay, so a data product is not a CSV. It's not a dashboard in Power BI. It's something a little bit different. It's all these things you can read on the screen, but thing is, it's reusable. It's active. You can chat with it. You can ask questions to your data products, and you can imagine that for AI, you get things even a little bit richer these days. It can contain more than one data artifact, okay? It can contain a CSV, or it can contain a Parquet file, or it can contain an AI model, okay? But the thing is, what it is, it has also a lot of metadata, a rich set of metadata. It has a clear ownership, okay? That's an important thing. So we know of things that are behaving on who to contact with to make it evolve. And it adheres to FAIR principles. So FAIR is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Okay, so that's a definition. And this definition, I've been privileged enough to contribute to it. But in January of 2025, we managed to put about 40 people in a room during Data Day Texas. And there was product managers, there were data engineers, there was all this spectrum of people. And we sat together, and that's a result. And now this definition is the one that is on Wikipedia. Okay, hopefully it's the one that lasts. So if you're more into the architecture of things, if you look at what's inside a data product, you will find things you're very accustomed with. When I say this data onboarding here, this ETL, this is your traditional pipeline, okay, where your data is flowing in. The pipeline we just talked at the beginning, the data is being stored in the stores there. You see the output ports where you're consuming the data, and you see these little triangles. Those are my data contracts here, okay? And I can even have my data contract at the input there that actually guarantees that what is coming in my flow is what I'm expecting, okay? And then you see control services, okay, control, observability, and dictionary services. Those are actually how I interact with my data contract. I can ask, hey, how was your last data quality run, okay? And the data product can tell me it was fine, or, oh, unfortunately, you should probably not send this data to your CEO, okay? Because the data product knows. Okay, you see now the connection also with AI. If something is a little bit more required, they are a little bit more sensitive at that part. Okay. And that was the data product as this hexagon with the output ports, with the metadata ports, was actually something that was described in Zhamak Dehghani's data mesh book. Okay, so when Zhamak Dehghani released her book, that's really how she built and designed data products. Okay, and she continues to do that. So at Bitol, we had the data contract standard, but we needed to also do the open data product standard. Okay, so how do I define my data product there? And the thing is, as you see, this is same philosophy. Okay, there's a few things which are required. and a lot of things which are optional, which give you guidance on how you can actually implement them. That the contributors have reduced in number, but that's not a big deal, okay? I think it's probably a little bit better, but then you see that the fundamentals and product information are still something which is required. And you see here, there's little guys there, because you're defining output ports, and this little guy is the output data contract, okay? So you see back the link to what we just saw before. And if we look a little bit, it's also YAML, okay? So you see the YAML here, that's just the fundamentals, and you see the name there. And then here's how I define in this scenario one output port, which is called row transaction, and I've got all this information about it. And I can see the input contract that is linked to it, okay? So I can lineage information from that part as well. And that's how I define my input port. And that's how I define one management port out of as many I want. And this one is actually used for a dictionary. So that's it. So why are we doing all that? To try to make data more AI ready. Okay. And let's dive a little bit into these things. I hope everybody on this call is familiar with analytics ready data. Okay. So when we look at what is analytics ready data, it's really analytics operations are performed by human, typically data scientists or business analysts that looks at data, it requires data. Hopefully it's guaranteed by a data contract, okay? And there's a source of explanation where you find information about, based on your catalog, your glossary, your marketplace, some kind of metadata management tool in your company. But when we're looking at how we transform our knowledge into this juicy extraction of data, this transformation of data that a data scientist is doing, it's based on the context the person has. Okay, so their studies, their degree, their work experience, the tribal knowledge of the company, empiric knowledge they gathered, some business rules and business exceptions, etc., etc. All this experience there is helping making a good analyst, okay? And it's distributed via an output port, so data or report or whatever. When you look at AI, it's performed by machines. It still requires data. So I'm chuckling because every time I'm saying that, I'm thinking about people saying that at the beginning of Gen AI, people were saying, hey, we don't need data anymore. Sure, we don't. But it's still guaranteed by the same data contract. The source of explanation, all this data there is still there, but it's available as a data contract as well. Okay, but the experience, which is really the context. So if you look at Gartner's, the buzzword of 2026 is context. But the thing is, how do we build it for AI? This is the billion-dollar question, okay? And so that's why so far what I'm putting here is a massive load of unstructured data. But what you're finding in this is all that fits into a data product. Okay, so that's why we are doing all these things, because it all fits together, including this context information. So I promise to be fast. So let's try to wrap it up. I'm obsessed about getting value out of things. And we are not in a scenario anymore where you can have, I don't know, 5 years to do a snowflake implementation. Okay, that doesn't work anymore like that. You've got to be able to deliver value very quickly. So what is the kind of value you can get at every step of the way? Okay, so if you're implementing data contract, you can have better documentation, better data quality of service, which is data quality and your SLA, faster discoverability. This is the kind of value you extract from data contract, or you benefit from data contract when you implement them. When you've got data products, well, you can see that the list is increasing, okay? You've got more trusted AI, you've got higher security, you've got a way to actually evolve in an easier way. You've got a faster time to market, etc. Okay, so all this information when you actually do the data product. You've got to think that you get value with a minimal version of data contracts and data products, but the more information you put in them, the more value you will get out of it. Okay, for example, in data contracts, if you don't put the data quality rules in your data contract, well, it's going to be more difficult to measure it. But it's one way to do it. And then so you've got this horizontal kind of maturity that I'm showing you, from data contract to data product to eventually data mesh. And you've got a little bit of this vertical maturity where you can have more information in your data contract, more information in your data product that makes you performing even better. Okay. And I put data mesh here. Some people are allergic to data mesh. I'm obviously not. I've read a couple of books on it, but you don't have to. If you don't feel comfortable going there, or people said, oh, I've tried that and it didn't work, it's a rather complex system to put in place, especially federated data governance and the change management to put that in place. It's a little bit complex. So you can say, okay, I'm going to stop at data products, and that's fine. Okay. You'll get a lot of value at data products already. I will let Maribeth distribute the slides, and this is just a few interactive tutorials if you want to play with them. It's very popular. It requires a little bit of hands-on things like that, but if you want to play with it, it's a lot of fun. Almost at the end, I want to say that open standards, and what we're doing at Beetle with the Linux Foundation, is open standards. For me, it's actually stronger than open source. Okay. Open source is, I love open source. I love Linux. I love what the Apache Foundation has been doing for software for the last 20, 25, 30 years. All that is fantastic. But without open standards, just imagine HTML being proprietary to, back then, Netscape or Microsoft or Apple or whatever. If they had, if everybody had proprietary standard, we wouldn't have the web like we have now. Okay, so you can imagine that a little bit like ODCS, Open Data Contract Standard, and the Open Data Product Standard. It's a little bit like the HTML and the CSS. It makes everything work together a lot easier. So think about open standard and your role. I don't know in which organization you are, but if you are working for end users or consulting, you've got to demand from your vendors to adhere to open standard. You can't let them say, oh, it's a black box and you don't have to look at it, or you can't look at it. Okay. So this is your responsibility to push the vendor towards more open standards. Okay, wrap up. So the first one is, the first bullet point here is really very arrogant. And this slide went through my marketing department and they told me to write that. And the thing is, I was not in favor of it. I'm saying, I'm not working for Beep. I don't want to tell you what is more important than you think, okay? But the thing is, I agreed to put it in because actually it's true. The thing is, I'm talking to a lot of people about data contracts, and everybody that wants to do this and started implementing data contracts are coming back saying, I got a great ROI. It was faster than I expected, and it brings me more value. Okay, so it's really more important than one could think at the beginning. And then the thing is, data contract and product are enabling your AI journey. It seems like if you're in tech, you're on an AI journey somewhere, right? So think about data contracts and data product as really enablers there. And of course, open standards, and a little plug for my company, we fully support open standard like A2A, MCP, ODCS, ODPS. I think this is really important that whatever vendor you work with, you're pushing in this direction. Okay, so yeah, if we're not connected yet, connect on LinkedIn, or we can do Medium, or we can do Substack. Substack is where I write a lot. I've wrote a kind of a few easy exercise there. The minimalist data contract was a very successful post and a lot of very important information. Okay, all right, I'm done. Back to you, Mariette.
That was a great presentation. Thank you. Before we go into other comments and questions, I wanted to ask you about your benefit slide, because my instinct on data mesh is that there are more benefits, and I guess it depends on the organization, but when you have domain owners who are empowered to own the data and self-service, and you're eliminating bottlenecks that hypothetically were there if you were in a more, I guess, traditional data management structure, you are opening the company up for more innovation, for maybe more competitive differentiation by introducing new data products. So I guess to me, there seem to be even more potential benefits.
I agree. I agree. And I'm happy to borrow some of yours to add them here. I went very fast over data mesh. The thing is, I love data mesh. It's a bit of a double-edged sword in a way. Some people, as soon as you talk about data mesh, they run away. Some people love it. Some people are afraid of it. My experience is that it, it's really people like it, but the name has started to have a bit of a negative connotation because people were burned by it, or it was a little bit, I wouldn't say dangerous, but it had bad press at some point. Okay. So I'm still leaving it here because I think it's there. And as soon as you've got 5 or 6 data products, what are you going to do with them anyway? You've got to do something. Okay. You've got to link them, to mesh them in a way. And data mesh provides you all with all this. So I agree with you. I love data mesh. At PayPal, we were super successful with the implementation of it. I was not as successful with other organizations where they felt more comfortable just stopping at data products.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because the first question that comes to my mind is the problem data mesh, or is the problem organizational change, behavior change, and getting people to buy in and adopt and adjust? Or is it something about the model that inherently may not fit certain organizations?
I think you nailed it. It's change management.
Yeah.
Okay. That was my experience as a
Mhm.
consultant. That was my experience. Yes, it's always the humans.